Great. So it looks like we have a pretty good, a solid group of about 10 folks on the line currently. And essentially what we're going to run through is we're going to run through kind of all things PCI compliance at Sumo Logic, how, we kind of initially we'll talk about some combination of how our customers are today using PCI compliance tools within Sumo Logic to actually track and improve their PCI compliance posture. We will also kind of talk through the various aspects in which Sumo actually, as this platform itself, is PCI compliant. So we'll kind of touch on some of those pointers, but with a primary focus on helping to improve your team's usage of Sumo, whether you're a customer today or a prospect that's currently considering Sumo as a tool for PCI compliance or various security efforts within your company. So we'll kind of run through that. Let's see. So just as was mentioned in the chat, we're really excited to have you here. We actually have an active recording running, so we will have a recording available to all the folks on the line. Again, whether you're considering using Sumo or current customer, it will be made available to you. And certainly feel free to hop into the Q&A function, which is right at the center of the screen. That will allow you to actually post your question. And then I'll be answering questions most likely at the end of the session. I think in some cases, I will also kind of jump in and just kind of address things on the fly as things come in. So yeah, with that, I'll kind of dig in. We'll, like I said, I want to spend as much time as we can today actually live in the Sumo platform. But we'll actually start off with just a couple quick slides just to kind of level set on what we're actually covering today, and also a little bit about just Sumo itself and give you a little bit more familiarity about us as a company as well. So with that, I'll go into talking through some various components of how we actually function today. So, as a platform, we have quite a few customers that are actively using Sumo today, just as you would see like with this dashboard here, to constantly have an eye on the 12 requirements for PCI and how they're actually navigating towards those goals, whether it's for a specific data source, such as Windows or Palo Alto Networks firewalls, for example, or whether it's a more broad-based overview look, which we'll look at these more kind of overview examples that give you a little bit of a view into how the platform functions in a broader sense as well. We have, many customers that are using the platform today. It's a very much we're aligned with all the PCI compliance requirements as a platform as well. So whether you're looking at financial transactional data, or you're looking at various other types of personal data that you're concerned about making sure that is being made secure, in order to make sure that your customer base itself is very confident in your product and has awareness around how you're actually actively tracking that. Or on the other hand, it may be that you have an audit team, whether it's a third party or internal, that is making sure that you're aligned with all the expectations around PCI requirements. A lot of this is going to come down to financial and personal data that needs to be saved, as probably a lot of the folks on this call are aware. It needs to be not only stored in the system, but also be kept securely and also be tracked as far as clear understanding of what types of data are coming in, which types of data might be of a concern, and which may need to be stripped out of the system moving forward via, whether it's hashing, masking rules, et cetera, which we'll get into as well. So a couple of the kind of key challenges that we see. Typically we'll see this issue with some platforms where there just is not a really clear focus on cloud support. So there may not be that current approach to scaling and being able to really handle those larger cloud workloads. Additionally, there's oftentimes these very slow cycles for PCI readiness. So it can be very, very time consuming to actually deploy your product, while all at the same time you're trying to figure out how you can actually be PCI compliant in the process. So the goal of Sumo right here is to kind of ensure that we're kind of allowing the PCI compliance process to a little bit get out of the way and allow you to really focus on that product deployment. Thirdly, there's the complexity aspect, right? So these very complex solutions that you might see in the market, they're going to require a really steep learning curve throughout the process. Getting to know how to use the platform. There's not a lot of out-of-the-box content that you can just get off and running with on day one. And then lastly, we'll just mention, certainly expense is one concern. You end up with kind of these fixed licenses that might not be aligned exactly with the business need. And we have this very kind of flexible credit and tiering pricing structure that allows you to kind of align with just what the need is for your team. So essentially, how does our solution kind of map to that? So the first thing to think about is, Sumo itself is very much a cloud native data monitoring tool. So we're built on AWS, and we have been from day one. And that's what allows us to really move quickly and scale our platform just as quickly as our customers are. That analysis is also very much a cloud native style of analysis that's allowing you to run run queries or dashboards, alerts, etc., against your cloud data as well as your on-prem data. And then it's also the retention aspect. So you have these options of various retention options within our tiering structure, which we'll kind of get to throughout the length of the day, and not the main focus for today, but just one consideration that really allows that kind of really cost-effective, rapid PCI readiness that we're driving towards. And this is for both cloud and on-prem environments. Here you can see a little bit of a preview. We'll go into a lot more detail, but a little bit of a preview here of the types of data sources you would want to be bringing in. So you're looking at firewall data, database data, certainly OS level, so Linux or Windows, et cetera, servers and workstation data. Microservices, obviously a broad term here, a little bit of a catch-all, but it can include a lot of variety of services that maybe your SRE team or your security team is managing themselves, whether it's open source or something you built in-house, for example. And then there's also kind of IAM data, so that would include whether it's OneLogin, Okta, Microsoft Azure data that you're bringing into the system, allowing you to really keep close tabs on that and be able to track that throughout. A couple of the key advantages that come into play with Sumo would be, we kind of touched on the cloud native scalability focus. You really can scale up quickly and do it in a very dynamic way based on what the need is, whether it's for some given sports events or political event that's coming up that your team or your company needs to be able to scale quickly and make sure that your platform is able to take on more traffic, for example, and be able to track how much CDN data is coming in, just as one example. This kind of rapid compliance readiness, which we'll get into throughout the scope of today. We only have 30 minutes, so we'll only be able to go into so much detail, but that certainly will be one focus. And then the ability, that kind of use and flexibility. So you can really tailor the platform to your needs based on kind of our credit structure gives you that flexibility to do what you need based on which aspects of the product you're most interested in. And then very cost effective, very much in line with that last piece. So this is actually the last piece, I guess second to last piece that I'll go into before just jumping straight into the actual platform, and we'll have some fun with the actual demo itself. I may not go into detail right away because we're actually going to come back to these later on all throughout the scope of today. In the next 20 minutes, we'll be able to cover these. But essentially, all 12 of these will have some element of coverage, whether it's because Sumo itself is compliant with it, or for basically 11 out of 12 of these are PCI compliance requirements that you can cover by using the Sumo platform to actually track your own data within the system. And then just some quick stats just about Sumo itself. So we currently have over 2,000 customers. A strong portion, I should say, of those are using us for PCI compliance needs. 30 million plus searches performed daily. 100 petabytes of data that's being analyzed daily. So and quite a few queries being run on the daily as well. So very very heavy kind of a flow of data coming into the system regularly. So in the interest of time, I'm gonna kind of jump into into the fun part, which is the actual demo itself. I'm gonna start with, so this is the Sumo platform, just a little bit of just kind of familiarity really quickly for the folks that haven't seen it before. I won't have time to go into kind of the broader, we can't dig too deeply into the broader scope, but we want to have some fun with just being specific to PCI today. But just for your own awareness, when you kind of first come to the platform, the primary focal point will be the ability to fire up either a log search, a metrics query. Traces is a new addition to our platform, Livetail, which is basically live data running through the system, as well as Explorer and Dashboard, which are basically, Explorer will allow you to navigate through Kubernetes data. Dashboard is everything we're going to be doing today is around basically dashboards, so you'll get a lot of familiarity throughout today. In the left column, you'll see all of the save down queries, dashboards, etc., that you'll be able to share out with existing teammates within the Sumo platform for folks that aren't familiar. And then there are various sub panels within like administration, managed data, where you can set up your collection processes, field extraction rules, etc. So with that, I'm going to kind of kick off. Well, actually, just prior to that, I'm going to show you kind of within the app catalog. So if you just go to app catalog in PCI, you'll see the lion's share of what I'm going to show today will be available to you if you just type in to the search bar PCI. You'll see everything that's available to you as far as AWS CloudTrail, VPC Flow, Linux, Palo Alto Networks. There are a few other dashboards I'll show today that are not necessarily specific to AWS, CloudTrail, or Linux, for example, but we'll cover a broader scope. We also have the general PCI compliance piece. There are a couple queries available through there. But you would work with our professional services team to kind of do something a little bit more custom is kind of the approach from that panel. So without further ado, let's kind of jump straight into the platform. So an example of kind of an overview dashboard, this is showing us an overarching look at all 12 of the PCI requirements. So if I just jump straight back to this, we see the 12 core requirements, which we'll cover today. So for example, protecting stored data, regularly testing security systems, maintaining policy. This is a look at breaking down within your system all of the data that is running in your system for, assuming that this is run on source category equals star, which is a wildcard across all of your categories. This will actually tell you all of the 12 requirements. In this case, we're seeing quite a big spike for failures by requirements on requirements 6 and 7. So those are things that are going to need to be addressed. Maybe some smaller issues with requirement 8, and then nothing popping up for 1 through 5 or 12 in this instance. And then we see, similarly, we kind of see this stacked bar chart. In this case, we're seeing a grouping of data that's showing it as quite a bit of data that's stacked over time, and it's actually breaking down by how many thousands of history of failures over some number of days. And in this case, for this slice of data, we're seeing that 1 through 4 is where the kind of lion's share of the issues are coming in from. So, okay, so and then we see the broader scope. You can see just the total number of incidents as well. So in the interest of time, let's kind of jump ahead. So, I'll just go straight into requirement 1 here, right? So requirement 1 is really focused on the installation and maintenance of a given firewall configuration. So in this example, we're actually looking at some generalized firewall data that's coming in. And what we can do is we can basically see, similar to the last chart, we can see these stacked bar charts. And this is a really interesting kind of slice of requirement 1 for PCI requirements. So in this case, you can actually get really granular data of whether it's broken out by UDP versus TCP data within your allowed network activity by transport and internet layer protocol. And that's going to actually tell you all of these breakdowns, and you just get a really quick sense, again, because it's historical. In this case, it's broken down by 5-minute increments. We're looking at 1 hour time slice, and you can adjust all of these things within based on your audit requirements. But this gives you a little bit of a sense of what you're actually going to be able to see just from a firewall perspective. And then we actually get a little bit more of the raw data here. So we'll just see in more tabular format, the kind of top destination IPs that we're seeing coming in. We're seeing the top source IPs. And then we're also seeing various denied traffic over time. So a lot of really interesting data that's coming in. You can also click through to any of these. It's called a drill down query, and we can see the actual query itself. So you can see that, essentially how the query is built, how it's constructed, what all constitutes the data within that. And then if you look at the tabular data, you'll see the more detailed data if you require more of a breakdown by these 5-minute increments. So it's just kind of a quick rundown of just a general dashboard for folks that aren't as familiar, and also how you drill down into the queries from the dashboards. And then B, just really starting to look at how we can help you as a customer to really navigate and be more confident in how you map towards requirement 1 specifically. Requirement 2 is really focused on restricting the use of vendor supplied kind of defaults for passwords, etc. So in this case, we're actually looking at, and we can kind of just click through to the drill down and look at what type of data. So in this case, we're looking at Linux OS data specifically, but this could be generalized for other types of operating system data, just as an example. And you can see the actual destination host and the successful logins attached to that. We might be interested in drilling down from there, because then basically the breakdown of successful logins, and the failed logins will tell us, the likelihood of the, some number of failed logins may point to someone that's, for example, attempting to try to log into an account that may not actually be there. So we see a kind of alarmingly high number for failed logins, possibly an area of focus, something to drill down on there. And then you see the various default logins attached to that. So requirement 3 actually is more we can speak to that more just as far as how Sumo itself goes about encrypting data. We have a lot of documentation about how we as a platform go about encrypting that data. We have what's called a self-service platform, which allows you to basically pull down all of our SOC reports and various reporting and attestations that will help you to confirm that you feel confident that Sumo would take some degree of, the fact that the data is being stored on Sumo means that you can make sure that you're aligned with PCI 3 as it pertains to usage with Sumo. So we'll kind of skip over requirement 3 from that perspective, but more jump into requirement 4 as we think more about how you can actually use Sumo as a platform in order to ensure your PCI requirements. So the next piece, we get a sense here, we're actually looking at how transmission of cardholder data specifically is going to be encrypted. So we can look at how insecure traffic, for example, is being passed through various ports. In this case, we're actually looking at Palo Alto Networks data. So not only can we look at it from a perspective, and I should have mentioned at the top of this that all 12 or all 11 of these dashboards we're looking at today are actually available straight out of the app catalog in some form. So you don't necessarily need to customize to get to this point. This is something you can just get straight out of the box. And so we should look at this from a perspective of, not just how can I handle all 12 requirements, but also secondly, how can I utilize these various visualization methods to align with, my specific PCI requirement needs within my organization. So just want to call that out because this is a little bit different way of looking at the stack bar chart. And here we can see examples of IPs that are coming in. So these are insecure allowed traffic by target port and involved host. And very quickly, because of this style of visualization, you can see these stack bar charts are really quickly surfacing for this given port, what the involved hosts are that you're most concerned about. So it's just a really quick way. I think otherwise you would kind of do a lot of digging just within the query itself. But this is an example of kind of how powerful a dashboard can be to actually give you that quick visualization. And I think we often say it's like we also get into alerts too, right? Which is that, well, we want to give you the ability to set up an alert and say, you save this down and then schedule the search, and whether it's a unified alert or which is part of our new beta program, or whether it's just as simple as a straightforward alert with a certain threshold on it. We also don't necessarily want you to really have to live in the dashboard. We want you to be able to run alerts that tell you when you have a spike, such as this one on 8080, and be able to react to that accordingly. So there's kind of this multi-pronged approach from the queries and from the alerts and from the dashboards as well. So we're really focused on dashboards today, but everything has a query that underpins it and then an alert that can be generated from that query. Jumping into requirement 5, which is really focused on protecting all your systems against malware and updating all your anti-malware measures as well. So in this case, we're kind of predicating this on that in this sample data that you would have Netscope data, for example, that you're kind of leaning on under the behind the scenes. You're bringing the Netscope data, and then you're saying top 10 malware types. So it's, in this case, Trojan virus, custom hash hit, malicious app, and then you can have these kind of breakdowns, and it kind of tapers off from there. So you kind of gives you the ability to know what to focus on more readily. Requirement 6 is mostly focused on the ability to kind of develop and maintain your secure systems and applications. So obviously that's kind of a broad initiative, but in this case, we're looking at specifically Windows data. So within that Windows data, we're saying, what are the, in this visualization, we're saying, what are the update trends overall, and how do we actually make sure that all of the devices that, our internal corporate IT team, for example, is making sure that they're actually actively updating each of those machines, and that there aren't any, there may be upswings in updates based on certain update schedules. But also it's probably a good sign that we see consistent flow of new updates coming in. At the same time, we're probably not very excited here if we see a lot of failures, right? It indicates that something about the updating plan or schedule or mechanism or process is kind of getting thrown off, and that might be an area of focus to kind of address. Jumping ahead to requirement 7, so obviously this is a huge one for everything around PCI compliance. This is really focused on having understanding around cardholder data and making sure it's broken down by each of the various business need to knows. So this is just giving you the ability to track the current active services, as well as the various user accounts that are being created as you kind of run through the process. And I'll do a little bit of a speed round. We're coming up against time a little bit, and I do want to give a little bit of time for some Q&A if folks do have any questions throughout the process. So requirement 8 basically is focused on, for folks that are familiar with PCI compliance, it's really going to be about, similar to the last piece where we're kind of looking at these user accounts being created and deleted. We can kind of use some of these same visualizations to attack requirement 8 and approach that with the right insights into your data, which is to say, okay, identify and authenticate all access to these system components. And then you kind of have the ability to track these active services. You see which unique services are being run so that you know what to actually navigate to. In this case, we're most focused on Linux data in particular. Requirement 9 is really all about restricting physical access to cardholder data. So in this case, I just wanted to, and this is just more just for visualization's sake, whether your company is using, whichever vendor you might be using for actual physical cardholders. Obviously, in the time of coronavirus, we're seeing a little bit less kind of foot traffic, but arguably it's that much more important because of the fact that you might have fewer visits to the office, but also, there might be fewer people at the office, which makes it more of a concern of like having less visibility into how the office is actually having foot traffic pass through it. So this is just an example of how you might visualize that data via our geo-mapping tool. So we actually have built into the Sumo platform the ability to do geo-mapping and actually drill down on specific parts of the world based on where you're seeing the most hits. So in this case, we're seeing a lot of hits kind of on the East Coast, and then you can kind of drill in to where on the East Coast you're seeing the most. So it looks like there's quite a few coming in through New Jersey, as well as looks like, what is that? Virginia, which is quite common when we're using our data, because we're oftentimes just looking at AWS data, which commonly is coming out of Virginia, and various other states around the East Coast. So you can kind of identify these hotspots, right? And then you can also break it down by country over time. So just this is one way to kind of break down and look at your physical cardholder data and kind of approach it from there. In the interest of time, I'll kind of jump ahead here. So requirement 10 is focused on kind of all network resources and all of the cardholder data attached to that. So in this case, we're looking at potential console root login failures and wanting to have a close eye on that, as well as like failed API calls against that network, for just as one example. And then I'll just kind of jump through the last two. Requirement 11 is a little bit unique in that actually two things that are unique here. So if we open this in search, we'll see that this is actually coming in from Aqua data. So this
Hey folks, this is the Sumo host. It looks like Jason has a little bit of internet connectivity issues. We'll give him a minute here and see if he can come back. Again, everybody, thanks for waiting and standing by. Jason should be hopping back on here in just a minute.
Hey folks, this is Jason. Can you still hear me? Maybe if you just respond in the chat there.
And welcome back, Jason. I let everybody know that you were having some internet connection issues and that you're going to jump back on. So welcome back.
Okay, yeah, thanks a lot. I'm actually just on mobile, so I just I know we're up against time here, but I definitely you know the last piece I'll just mention there was that I was walking through kind of the new dashboard piece, which essentially allows you to combine you know logs as well as metrics queries into one dashboard. That's kind of the unified dashboard that you would get out of that. So so yeah, with that, I think you know we were able to cover get quite far through the kind of 12 requirements and cover the core pieces. I know we're up against time, so I definitely appreciate folks hopping on the webinar, and sorry for the internet cutting off in the last minute or two there. So it looks like there may be okay, just one Q&A with someone who just responded they can still hear me. Does anyone have any questions before we kind of close things out for the day here? So, and the last thing I'll mention here is, as well as I know that you'd seen in the chat, basically, you do have the option to kind of hop in from here and just join up for a free trial. So the URL for that would be sumologic.com/sign-up. And that'll allow you to kind of jump in and just kind of really get to know the platform better and be able to get jump into all of these kind of PCI compliance dashboards that we had walked through today. Everything is kind of more or less available out of the box with just some light customization. So you should be able to get off and running quite quickly through that. And there's also the Sumo Logic Slack if you have additional questions that have popped up from today's Q&A. So with that, I think we'll end the session for today. Thanks so much for hopping on. Really appreciate everyone joining this morning, afternoon, or evening, depending on your part of the world. And really look forward to seeing what you achieve with Sumo with from as far as PCI compliance, posture improvements go. And thanks so much for hopping on. We will talk to you guys soon.